Okay, we are going to be catching up for all that we missed from Lamed Daled Amud Beis through Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. Here we go. We are on Lamed Daled Amud Beis at the two dots. Taner Rabbanan. Taner Rabbanan. Ben Hashmashos Safek Min Hayom Min Halayla. The Ben Hashmashos. We'll define exactly what Ben Hashmashos is, but it is literally means between the two suns. So it seems like it's time between day and night. That is being hashmashos. So during that time, the Gemara defines that time. The Brisa defines the time. It's safek min hayom min halayla. It's a doubt whether it's night or day. Safek kula min hayom. It is a doubt whether it's entirely day. Safek kula min halayla, and it's a doubt that it might entirely be night. So in other words, there's three possibilities here. Either bein hashmashos is entirely night. Either bein hashmashos is entirely day, or bein hashmashos is a mix of both day and night. Okay, that last one of day and night at the same time. That's the most complicated. We'll come back and discuss that a little bit later. So metilanos lechomer shnei yomim, and therefore what we do is we apply the stringencies of both days. Okay, and we'll discuss what the stringencies of both days are. For our intents and purposes for Shabbos, we know that we apply the stringencies both in the beginning of Shabbos and the end of Shabbos. We start Shabbos at Ben Hashmashos because already at sunset, even though it's a doubt, maybe it's day, maybe it's night, we treat it like it's already night, and therefore we start Shabbos. However, on the going out of Shabbos, when it's Ben Hashmashos, if we would be consistent, we'd say, oh, now it's already night, because on Friday we treat it as night. But no, when it comes to leaving Shabbos, we treat that as already still consider part of Shabbos, and we treat it therefore as day, right? So we basically we apply the chumras of both. Okay, we'll come back and we'll see some other chumras that apply because we place the stringency of both days on it. What has been a Hashmashos? Once the sun has set, as long as the eastern face of the sky is reddening. So again, sunrise in the east, it goes down to the west. So the eastern side is going to get darker first before the western side because the sun is now on the west. So as long as the sky is red on the east side, then it is still daytime. Okay, excuse me. Then it is bein hashmashos. Okay, the implication of this first line is that when the eastern side is no longer red, then it's already nighttime. We'll see the next line seems to contradict this because it says hichsif hatachton v'lo hichsif ha'elyon. If the bottom part of the sky on the eastern side is dark and the upper part is not yet dark, bein hashmashos, it's still bein hashmashos. So right in the first line it said that the whole eastern side has to be red, and then it says only when the bottom part is dark and the top part is red, it's still bein hashmashos. So we'll come back and we'll see how to read these last lines. Hichsef ha'elyon, once the upper part of the sky has also become dark on the eastern side of Hishla Tachlan, it's the same as the bottom. So now the entire eastern side is dark. Zeh Laila, that is night of Rabbi Yehuda. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Nechemi Omer, different opinion number. So again, Rabbi Yehuda says that when the sun goes down, that's when Hashmashos starts. When does it end? When the entire eastern side becomes dark. Okay, Rabbi Chemia Omer, a person walks a half a meal, which is a 9-minute walk. From sunset, that is the amount of time for Ben Hashmashos. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Ben Hashmashos geharef ayin zaynichlas v'yotzi v'yefshel lam love. Rabbi Yossi says no. Ben Hashmashos is like a blink of an eye. It's like it takes a split second, and you can't determine the exact moment. And we'll come back soon, and we'll see when does Ben Hashmashos start. According to Rabbi Yossi, granted it might end for like a split second, but when does it start? Amar Mar, let's go back to that statement that we said we have to apply the stringencies. Metilanos lechomer shnei yamim. We apply the stringencies of 2 days for each Ben Hashmashos. We treat it both like the day that it's coming from and the day that it's going into. Amar Rav Huna l'may hilchsa, regarding what is this being said. Amar Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yishul inyan tuma. We're going to apply this principle to the laws of tuma. So let's quickly review the laws of a zav. A zav is someone who has a certain discharge. Let's just stick to a man who has a certain discharge. It's true for a woman as well. And this discharge, it's more straightforward for a man. A man has two such discharges. Then the person becomes a zav ketana, and they have to wait 7 days of no discharges at all. And then they go to the mikvah and they're pure and they're tahar. However, you have a zav gedolah person has 3 discharge over the course of consecutive days. They have 3 discharges. Then such a person is a zav gedolah, and that person has to bring a korban as well. So again, 2 days, 2 discharges. The person becomes a zav, and they have to wait 7 days. 3 days, 3 discharges, then the person becomes a zav gedolah, and they have to not only wait 7 days, but also bring a korban at the end of this process. Now, if there is a day in between the discharges, then it ruins the counts. It has to be taking place over consecutive days, okay? So says the Mishnah. Okay, it's down. We have a Mishnah. Rosh Yamin Bein Hashmashos. So a person saw this type of emission on 2 consecutive days during Bein Hashmashos. Okay, so basically, let's just say, what's today? Thursday. Okay, so a person sees a seminal emission tonight between Bein Hashmashos and tomorrow Bein Hashmashos. So Thursday night at this Bein Hashmashos time and Friday Bein Hashmashos time. So something the Tuma, Le Korban. Okay, so if it's 2 consecutive days, then there is a possibility, A, that the person's not even tameh, and on the other extreme, there's a possibility the person has to bring a carbon. How so? Because like tonight, the person sees Ben Hashmashos. So there's one possibility that tonight they're really seeing it during Thursday day. And then the next emission they have is on Friday, but it's Friday night, right? Ben Hashmashos tomorrow night could be Friday night, and therefore they're going to see Thursday day. During Friday, there's no emission, and then Friday night, there is emission number 2, but there's a day in between, they're not even tameh, right? That's one possibility. Possibility number 2 is that they saw the mission tonight, and the mission is really part of the Ben Hashmashos is really part of the evening, and therefore they're really seeing it on Friday. And then they see a mission number 2 on Friday, Ben Hashmashos, but that Ben Hashmashos is really the day, and therefore they had two re'ios, two sightings of a zav discharge, and therefore they are tameh. There's also possibility number 3, which is that the re'iyah, the seeing tonight, took place over the course of Ben Hashmashos, and therefore that actually counts as 2 days, because maybe during Ben Hashmashos it's transitioned from day to night, and when you have an emission that takes place over the course of day to night, then it's like we split the emission in the middle, and it's 2 emissions. There's one from day 1, one from day 2, and therefore let's say they saw a emission tonight during Ben Hashmashos, we'll count it as 1 on Thursday, 1 on Friday, and then they have the second emission on Friday, and therefore they had 3 re'ios, and therefore they have premier carbon. And that's where the Gemara says you have 2 days of seeing an emission between Ben Hashmashos, then there is a suffix if they're even tameh, because maybe there's a day in between, and on the other extreme, they may even have to bring a carbon. Yom Echad Ben Hashmashos, they see one day Ben Hashmashos Safik L'Tuma. There's a doubt if the person's tameh, right? That one's much simpler. If you see once during Ben Hashmashos, the question is, do you count it as 1? And therefore it's 1 re'iyah, the person does not become tameh for 7 days, or do you say that it's now day and night taking place during Ben Hashmashos, and that time period is cut in the middle, and there's a re'iyah in the day, re'iyah at night, and therefore the person is considered tameh and they have to wait 7 days. Okay, so fine. Now the Gemara now explained what the relevance is regarding treating the chumras, acting on the chumras of both. Now the Gemara is going to go back and fully analyze the different opinions about when Ben Hashmashos takes place, with significant ramifications, right? Because when Ben Hashmashos ends, that's when nightfall begins, and that's when Shabbos is going to end, let's say, as one example, right? So when do we end Shabbos? When Ben Hashmashos is over. So how long is Ben Hashmashos? If Ben Hashmashos, right, because whenever Ben Hashmashos is going to be over, that's when the night is going to begin, and therefore Shabbos will be over as well. That's probably the most practical ramification of our entire discussion here. So first we analyze the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. That was the first opinion who said that sunset begins when the sun goes down. Ben Hashmashos, begins when the sun sets, and it lasts until, first he says, when the sky on the eastern side is red, which implies that if it's not entirely red, then it's already night. And then he says only when the entire eastern side is dark. So the Gemara is going to ask, which one is it? So Hagufa Kasha. Well, there's a contradiction in Yehuda's statements. Amras, first he said, is Ben Hashmashos, what is Ben Hashmashos? Mishtishka Chama, when the sun sets, calls Mashmanim Mizrach Madim, and as long as the eastern face of the sky is red. Ha Hichsev Tachton Hichsev Elyon, but that means that if part of the eastern side is no longer red, Laila, who it's night, Vadatana, then the next line said, Hichsev Tachton, the bottom of the sky got dark, the low Hichsev Elyon, but the upper part of the sky is not yet gotten dark, Ben Hashmashos, that is Ben Hashmashos. Okay, so which one is it? Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Karoch Vatani, teach them together. It's Ben Hashmashos. This is the way to read it. When is Ben Hashmashos? Mishatishka Chama, when the sun sets. Calls Manshmanim Mizrach Madimin. As long as the eastern sky is red, Vihichsev Tachton, and even if it's only partially red, meaning the eastern side, right? The eastern side is going to get dark first. The bottom of the eastern side got dark. Velo Hichsev Elyon, but the top part is still light. Nami Ben Hashmashos. It's still Ben Hashmashos. So what he was saying is that when the sun sets and the eastern side is red, as long as it's still even partially red, even if the bottom part is dark but the top part is red, that's still Ben Hashmashos. Nami Ben Hashmashos. Hichsev Elyon v'hishvel tachton. But if both the top and the bottom became dark, Laila, then it is night. That is the way Rabbah understands this Gemara. Rabbi Yosef from Yehuda Shmuel, Hachitan. This is the way to learn it. Misha Tishka Chama. Once the sun sets, calls Vanshmanim Mizrach Madimin Yom. He has a more lenient opinion. He says when the sun sets, as long as the entire eastern side is red, it's still day. That's still day. But when the bottom part of the sky becomes dark, the low but the upper part is still red, Ben Hashmashos. That's Ben Hashmashos, when the entire eastern side is dark, Laila, then it is night. Okay, so again, Rav Yosef, in the name of Yehuda Shmuel, is more lenient, we'll say, than Rabbah in the name of Yehuda Shmuel. Rabbah says Ben Hashmashos begins, I forgot lenient because it'll depend on the halacha, but the point is that Rabbah's view of Ben Hashmashos is much longer, a few moments longer, because he says it starts as soon as the sun sets, whereas Rav Yosef in the name of Yehuda Shmuel says that Ben Hashmashos begins when the when the bottom parts of the eastern sky becomes dark. And this is consistent with their views. The Itmar was learned, it was taught, Shir ben Hashmashos b'chama, how long is ben Hashmashos? Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Shlosha chelkei mil. He says the last 3 parts of a meal. 3 parts of a meal takes about 18 minutes, so 3/4 of 18 minutes, about 14 minutes or so. For the Gemara first has to understand, the terminology is a little bit funny. 3 parts of a meal? What is 3 parts of a meal? What does it mean? It's like I say 3 parts of a cup. What is 3 parts of a cup? My shlosha chelkei meal. What is 3 parts of a meal? Ilem etzlasa palgi meal. If you want to say it means 3 halves of a meal, name a meal mechzah. Just say 1.5 meal. Right? Why would you say 3 halves of something? Just say 1.5. El etzlasa tilsei mila. But if you want to say it's 3/3, name a meal. 3/3 is 1. So just say it's a meal. El etzlasa rive mila. Rather, it means 3/4 of a meal, which, as I said a moment ago, is 14 minutes. Rav Yosef and Rav Yehuda Shmuel, again, this was the second view, says shnei chelkei meal, 2 portions of a meal. The Gemara is going to ask the same question. What does 2 parts of a meal mean? Ilim and palgi meal. If you want to say it's 2 halves of a meal, lema meal. 2 halves of 1 is 1. Velatrei rive mila. If you want to say it's 2/4 of a meal, lema chatzi meal. Say it's a half a meal. Ella. We're now in the top of Lamed Hamad Aleph, Trey Tilse meal, 2/3 of a meal. Okay, so again, his portion is a little, Rav Yosef is a little bit shorter. My Benai, what's the difference between these two opinions? Benayo Palga Dedanka, 1/12 of a meal. A minute or so is the difference between these two views. Rabba's, right, because Rav Yosef's Ben Hashmashos starts a little bit later than Rabba's. Okay, again, we haven't yet said who we paskin like, but this is all within the view of Rav Yehuda, says that sunset begins either exactly when the sun goes down or a few moments later, a minute or so later, when the sky on the eastern side starts to get dark. Okay? Now, even though over here, Rabbah has a longer time period than Rav Yosef, elsewhere, there is the pattern's opposite. Where Rav Yosef has a larger number and Rabbah has a smaller number. Now you ask yourself, like, what's this doing over here? Why are we doing this? The reason is because so much of our Gemaras were recording oral conversations, and therefore sometimes when they were teaching these ideas over here, teaching these halachos, it was done in a way that the Rabbanim wanted their students to remember them, and therefore they said something even though it's not really relevant to our discussion. But if there's some pattern which is in some way connected, it's like a memory trick, and therefore they would teach it even if it wasn't exactly our discussion. So here we're going to go on a little bit of a tangent and talk about muktzah. Now, muktzah, generally speaking, a utensil which could be used is not muktzah. But we're going to see there's a view over here which we don't actually possibly like. If something goes from being a utensil to being like almost like furniture, it's no longer a utensil, it's no longer movable. It no longer you're no longer allowed to move it on Shabbos, and therefore becomes muktzah. Okay, so again, we don't pass like this, as Tosfos points out, but there are going to be 2 opinions over here about a basket which is tremendous, some form of a container which is tremendous. It no longer is usable, and therefore it becomes muktzah. So what is that discussion? They have the opposite views or the opposite ideas, where Rabbah is going to have a smaller portion, Rav Yosef is going to have a larger portion when it comes to baskets. Rabbah said, Chalta bas trei kore, a basket that holds 2 core of goods. A core is tremendous. It's like a few hundred liters. Few hundred gallons, okay? So tremendous portion. So Charlotte Taltalo, if it's 2 core, 2 of that measurement, you're allowed to move it. Uvas kore, but if it's 3 core, asla tatla, you're not allowed to move it. Rav Yosef Amar bas kore nami shar. Rav Yosef, no, even 3 you're allowed to carry. Basar ba kore asla, but if it's 4, you're not allowed to carry it, right? So it's the same idea, that it's the opposite idea. Over here, Rav Yosef is allowing a much larger amount. Amar Abaye, and Abaye now points out, he said there was a time of need where this was a practical question, and I asked Rabbah what the halacha is. He says if it's 2 core, you're not even allowed to carry. In other words, when he paskin for the masses, he paskin one way, saying 2 is okay, 3 is muktzah. But practically, when he's speaking to his own students, he said 2, you shouldn't even move something which is 2. Come on, where does he get this idea of even being strict about 2? So the Gemara says, where did Rabbah get this from? We'll see. It's based on a Mishnah that talks about the laws of Tumah and Tara. So there's an important halacha when it comes to something being tameh. A movable item is able to become tameh. Something which is not a movable item no longer is not susceptible to Tumah. Something like your house does not become tameh. Your cup could become tameh. Okay. So the Gemara is going to discuss about a basket. At what point does a basket go from being a cup, i.e. becoming tameh, to being more like a house? So kahaitana ditznan kaveres akash, a basket of straw, a basket of reeds, uvarsvina alexandrios, and a cistern, like a big thing of water that was used on these ships of Alexandria. Okay, certain type of big container. They have flat bottoms. If they hold 40 sa of liquid, shem korayin biyavish, which is 60 sa or 2 core of dry items, right? Meaning liquid only goes to the surface level. Dry items are you could go on top of it, right? So tahorim, it's tahor. If it holds 2 core, it's already going to be tahor. right? Why? Because it's no longer utensil, and that's where Rabbi was getting his view on Shabbos that you shouldn't move this thing because it's already that large. Okay, so Amar Abai just points out tangentially, another tangent on the tangent, Shmamina, Haigucha til Sahavi, that the heap of solids above the rim is 1/3 more than the volume of the utensil itself, right? In this particular case, now that's not going to be true in every container, but in these containers, I'd said, it's able to hold 40 sa of liquid, which is 2 kirayim, which is 60 sa, 2 koros, 60 sa of solids. So you see that the solids is 1/3 more than the volume was actually held in the container itself. Okay. Abaye chaz the Rava called Davi Lamarav. One Friday, Abaye saw the Rava was looking not towards the east, which we've been talking about until now, but to the west, to see if it was red. Amrle, Abaye said, what are you doing? Vatanya, we learned, Mizrach Ma'adimen. You're supposed to be looking in the east, not the west. Amrle, Misaras b'nei Mizrach Ma'amish doesn't mean the east side for real. Lo, Panama Ma'adimen is a Mizrach. It means the side that causes redness to the east side. The west causes light, the red, right? Because the west is where the sun is right now. The west causes light to the east. That's really what Rabbi Yehuda was talking about. Not the light on the eastern side, but rather the light on the western side. Okay? There's a slightly different version. He could Amri Rava Chaz Labaydikach Dave LeMizrach, that he was looking to the east. Amr Le, Rava said to him, Yisavas Ben Mizrach Mamish. He said, why are you looking to the east? Did you really think it was the east? Panamatimaz Mizrach, Visimana Kavsa really means the western side, which gives light to the east side, and a model of such a thing is like a window where light shines through the window. It's not just the window which is now has light, but rather the light shines through to the other sides of the room. Okay, fine. So now we're learning that it's not just the westerns. It wasn't the western side, the eastern side that should be looked to see if it's red, but rather it is the eastern side. Now we go back to the opinion of Rabbi Nechemia. He said it's a shorter period. It's 9 minutes. If you want to know how long this takes, stands on Mount Carmel, right, where Eliyahu was. And when you see the sun going down, run down the mountain. Go into the sea that's right there. Go dunk in, like mikvah. Then go back up. And this is the shear, this is the measurement of Rabbi Nechemia. Okay, that's the 9, which is essentially 9 minutes. Now keep in mind, you and I, 9 minutes. Well, look at your clock, look at your watch. They don't have watches back then, so they needed other ways of measuring times. That's just, you'll see this throughout the Gemara, because practically, they did not have watches. Rav Chia, Harotz Liros Be'era Shel Miriam. Now we're just going to tangent because we're talking about the Mount Carmel. If you want to see the well of Miriam, the well that kept the Jewish people satiated, hydrated throughout the time that they were in the desert, Yal Rosh Carmel, go to the top of Mount Carmel, V'yitzpeh, and gaze out, V'yira Kimin Kavara Bayam. You'll see a sieve in the water. It's like a boulder which has like holes in it. I always thought the Be'er Miriam was like this little rock or a big rock, whatever it is. It was big. It was a boulder which had like holes in it, which the water starts to pool and then poured out. Okay, and you could see it. You would have been able to see it. We can't see it now. V'zohi Be'er Shemim. This is the well of Miriam. Amarav Mayim Metal Tar V'zohi Be'er Miriam. A portable well is tahar. Now, typically you have like a pool that's like, a regular pool that you put water in. That's a portable pool. That thing's going to be tamei. Remember during COVID, people wanted to make mikvahs in their backyard. So I'll fill up my kiddie pool and I'll make it into mikvah. Not happening, right? But when it comes to a movable well, a thing which is producing its own water, now the only example of that is the well of Miriam, that is tahar, that is able to be a good mikvah. Amri v'Rabbi Shmuel, Ben Hashmashos Rabbi Yehuda Kohanim Tov Limbo. The Ben Hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda, Kohanim are able to be tovel in that time. Okay, again, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shmuel says the Ben Hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda, Kohanim are able to be tovel then. Leman. What does this mean? Ilan Rabbi Yehuda, if you want to say that according to Rabbi Yehuda himself, again, Rabbi Yehuda says that Rabbi Yehuda defines Ben Hashmashos when the sun goes down and until the blackening of the sky, the darkening of the sky. So Kohanim can be tovel then. Again, let's review the laws of Kohanim. Kohanim have to be tovel during the day, and then the next day they are allowed to eat truma. So Vakon is tamei. So whatever day they're going to purify themselves, they purify themselves on the one day, and the next day they can be tovel. That's how it works. Whatever day they were tovel, the next day they can be tovel. So the Gemara over here seems to be saying that they're allowed to be tovel during Ben Hashmashos. The Gemara says, how could that be? Sveikahu. That time is a time of uncertainty. How could you say the Kohen's allowed to be tovel Ben Hashmashos and then be permitted to eat the next day? It's a suffix. It's a suffix if it's day or night. Maybe it's already nighttime, in which case you'd have to wait another day. So how could you say he's allowed to be tovel Ben Hashmashos, implying that he's allowed to eat truma that night? Doesn't make sense. Ella Ben Hashmashos Rabbi Yehuda l'Rav Yosi Kohanim Tov Limbo. What the Gemara was telling, what the teacher was telling us is that the Ben Hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda, the time from when the sun goes down until the darkening of the sky, according to Rav Yosi, which was the opinion of Rav Yosi? He was the one who said that Ben Hashmashos is like the blink of an eye. According to him, during the Ben Hashmashos of Rav Yehuda, Rav Yossi would say a Kohen's Lada Tovel. Pshita, it's also obvious. Why is it obvious? It seems like the Gemara understood that Rav Yossi's Ben Hashmashos was certainly after Rav Yehuda. Rav Yossi who said that Ben Hashmashos is like the blink of an eye, that starts only it's later than the opinion of Rav Yehuda. So the Gemara says, no, this is what it's coming to teach us. Ma'adatema, we're not for Shmuel teaching us, as you would have thought, that Ben Hashmashos Rav Yossi Meshach Shach Rav Yehuda, that the Ben Hashmashos of Rav Yossi is within the Ben Hashmashos of Rav Yehuda. Kamash Malan, the Shlim Ben Hashmashos Rav Yehuda. The first the Ben Hashmashos Rav Yehuda ends. Again, Rav Yehuda's Ben Hashmashos begins when the sun goes down or a minute later. Okay, and then it continues until the darkening of the sky. Rav Yossi's Ben Hashmashos starts only after that, and that's where Shmuel was going to teach us. He was saying that according to Rav Yossi, if a Kohen immerses after the sun went down, before the entire side went dark, then according to Rav Yossi, that would be a good tefillah, because his blink of an eye Ben Hashmashos begins only after Rav Yehuda's Ben Hashmashos ends. Okay, Amar Rav Chanan Rav Yochanan, and how we have the halacha. Halacha ki Rav Yehuda, lean in Shabbos. The halacha is like Rav Yehuda regarding Shabbos. The halacha Rav Yossi lean in Truma, and the halacha is like Rav Yossi regarding Truma. So he says, what's going on here? Bishlam halacha Rav Yehuda lean in Shabbos lechumra. That the Rav Yochanan said the halacha follows like Rav Yehuda is, but regarding Shabbos, that's a chumrah, meaning that as soon as the sun goes down, we treat it like Shabbos. That's actually how we rule, because Rav Yochanan said so. Avalin and Truma Mahi. What did he mean that we paskin like Rav Yossi in regards to Truma? If you want to tell me that we paskin that you're allowed to immerse in a mikvah during Ben Hashmashos, sveikahi. How could Rav Yochanan say that? It's a suffix. The whole point that he just said by Shabbos, he's not sure it's day or night, and that's why we treat it stringently. So how can you now tell me that the Kohen's allowed to be tova, is allowed to immerse during that time? It's potentially already the next day. Then he won't be able to eat truma until a day later. That can't be el lachilas truma. Rather, when he said the lachas of Yossi regarding truma, he meant to eat truma, meaning you have to not only do you finish Ben Hashmashos when Rav Yehuda said you finish Ben Hashmashos, meaning when the darkening of the sky, but rather you have to wait the extra few moments or a few seconds of Rav Yossi, and only then we consider the next day, and that's when the Kohen's allowed to eat truma. To lo achli kanim truma adishlim Ben Hashmashos Rav Yossi, the Kohen cannot eat truma until the Ben Hashmashos of Rav Yossi. Okay, so let's just speak practically for a second. We paskin like Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda basically said that Ben Hashmashos starts at sunset. That we're good with, right? We all know that Ben Hashmashos starts at sunset. Shabbos practically begins at sunset. But when does Ben Hashmashos end? Now, this has practical ramifications for Shabbos ending, right? So, Ben Hashmashos according to Yehuda is when the eastern sky gets dark, right? The eastern side of the eastern sky gets dark, which we also define as 3/4 of an hour, 3/4 of a mil, which is about 15 minutes. Have you ever finished Shabbos 15 minutes after sunset? No, that would be really problematic. So what's going on over here? So the way that the Gra and others understand this is that that what's happening over here is that we're talking about in Bavel or in Eretz Yisrael. If you've spent some time in Israel and looked up at sunset, you'll notice it goes from sunset to nightfall very, very quickly. There, 15 minutes, maybe at certain points of the year, that's going to be nightfall. But elsewhere, let's say in America, it's going to take much longer. And that's where the idea of 42 minutes comes in, because based on how long it takes for the sun to set throughout different times of the year, many will rule that we wait 42 minutes. It's based on the same principle. It's based on the principle that that's when the eastern sky gets dark, but it is, western side gets dark, but it's going to be longer. It depends on the place. So in America, the norm of many hold of 42 minutes based on the opinion of Rav Yehuda. Now, it's worth noting there is an opinion of Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam points out there's a contradiction between our Gemara over here and Gemara in Pesachim. I'm not going to get into how he understands the whole thing, but bottom line is where he comes out is that the Gemara in Pesachim says that Ben Hashmashos begins 3 mil and 3/4 after sunset. 3 mil and 3/4. So a mil is 18 minutes. So that's basically like 64 or 65 minutes, whatever it is, 66 minutes is when Ben Hashmashos begins. That's when the day ends, right? So meaning according to Rabbeinu Tam, the way he reconciles these Gemaras is to say that night or Ben Hashmashos does not begin until 66 minutes after what we call sunset. And then 6 minutes later, it's nightfall. Okay, so, and this is, by the way that Shulchan Aruch, Paskins, the Ramah doesn't argue, and basically holding that night only begins, that even Ben Hashmashos only begins 66 minutes or so after sunset. And this was the way many ruled for many years. This whole notion of us going like the opinion of Yehuda was not necessarily so universal. And many would actually, so in certain places, some Hasidim still have this, go like Rabbeinu Tam, and they'll start Shabbos. They'll start Shabbos 66 minutes after we will. Now, of course, they'll also finish Shabbos after we will, because that's 72 minutes. Now, when people say, I hold like Rabbeinu Tam, what most people are telling you is they're holding of the stringencies of both the first view I just said and the second view. In other words, they say, maybe we go like Rav Yehuda, like our Gemara in Shabbos, and therefore we will say that Shabbos begins when the sun goes down. Okay? Sunset. But maybe we hold like the view of Rabbi Yehuda in Psachim, and the way Rabbeinu Tam understands it, and therefore we're not going to end Shabbos until 72 minutes later. So there's really three views over here. One is the view of our Gemara, the way it's understood by the Gaonim and the Vilna Gaon and others, and that is that, and how they paskin ultimately, and that is that sunset is the beginning of Bein Hashmashos, and when the sky gets dark, on the western side, that's when nightfall begins, and that's when Shabbos will be over, and depends on where you are, that's either going to be 15 minutes, 42 minutes, maybe longer, depends on where you are. And then you have Rabbeinu Tam, who says that sunset is not meaningful for our discussion. Shabbos begins at Bein Hashmashos, but that's 66 or so minutes after sunsets, and then nightfall begins about 6 minutes later. Okay, and that's Rabbeinu Tam's view that very few people hold. And then there are those like the Chavetz Chaim and the Erlacha says you should hold it both, where basically you start Shabbos at sunsets, like the opinion of some of the Rishonim, like Onim, and you end Shabbos like Rabbeinu Tam, like the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam. Have a great day. We'll pick up tomorrow.